This is Two Broads Talking Politics. Our guest today is Sarah Audelo, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Youth Action. On Monday, June 7th, be sure to check out my new podcast, Unsung History, anywhere podcasts are found. Hi, everyone. I am Kelly, and this is Two Broads Talking Politics. I am on today with Sarah Audelo, who is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Youth Action. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Kelly. It's so great to be here with you.
Yes, I am excited to talk to you. So I have lots of questions, but let me start with, how do you define youth? Every time I have anyone on who works with youth organizing or youth voters, I want to make sure we're talking the same language here.
Now, I appreciate you asking that because, depending on what organization we're working with, it can mean something very different. So, with the network that I'm very grateful to support, we have a pretty expansive definition, mostly to make sure we all kind of fit under this larger umbrella. So youth for us in the most expansive sense is like 16 to 34-year-olds, more or less. However, most of the young people that the groups in our network are organizing are between the ages of like 18 and 26 or so.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So then let's talk about the Alliance for Youth Action. What is this alliance, and what are sort of the goals of what you're doing?
Yeah. So the Alliance, we are a network of young people, by young people, for all people. And so it is a group of youth-led organizations from across the country that are building young people's political power. They are organizing on the issues that young people care about year-round. When it's time for elections, we're really taking those issues and flexing our power at the ballot box. So our groups will run large-scale voter registration and get out the vote efforts, and a lot of education about just how the heck our democracy works and how to vote. Our government does not make this easy. Frequently, I find we are doing the work that government should be doing to make sure that people are able to participate. But yeah, that is the work. It is 365 days a year. It is leadership development, and it is beautiful visions of a future that, yes, young people are fighting for, but will really benefit all of us.
And so you mentioned the issues that young people care about. What are those? Obviously, this is, a lot of different things, lots of different young people, and they don't all care about the same things. But what are the primary issues you find are really engaging young people?
Yeah, well, how you frame the question is actually really important because I get asked all the time, what is the number one thing that young people care about? And the thing is, it's many issues that, I've been doing this work for a long time, and the issues that will rise to the top, and it's many because young people are bringing their full selves to the work. They're bringing their full identities, they're bringing their communities, and the many struggles that folks are having. So it's everything from, leading up to the election. Certainly the pandemic was the number one issue that young people were thinking about, but it's also the economy and how the pandemic intersects with the economy or with their ability to access education. It's climate change, and, it's the air they're able to breathe and the water they're able to drink, and how we're taking care of the planet for the short and long term. It's police accountability and trying to reimagine safety in our country, but also looking out for our immigrant brothers and sisters. So it really is, a larger set of issues that underneath that is all about a greater sense of justice. And it's I think some of the things why I love organizing and supporting young people in their organizing is they'll also look at how these issues connect to one another, right? I think in the pandemic, we've seen so clearly how our healthcare and our economy are so intrinsically tied. And that to me is, that is part of the magic of organizing with young people.
What does that organizing actually look like on the ground? What does it normally, quote unquote, normally look like? And what does it look like for the past year and a half when the whole world has been upside down?
Yeah. So our network, our favorite place to be is in the field talking to young people directly. of course, the pandemic changed a lot of that, but in the biggest like sense, right? It is showing up in school board meetings and testifying about getting the police out of public schools, like Leaders Igniting Transformation does. It's about pushing county councils and, county administrators to act on climate like the young people at Move Texas do. It's about showing up and pushing your state legislators to take student debt seriously, which is what the young people at New Era, Colorado have done. But then it's also really cool work to engage the artist community, and the creative community of young people who are very much speaking about the issues that young people care about, but in a way that's more accessible in many cases. And that's like, I think about groups like Chicago Votes and the powerful work they've done alongside creatives for a very long time. So it's really engaging with every single lever of power that exists in order to make our communities safer and in order to make our communities more just. And so obviously that happened remote during the pandemic, which was tough, but we saw young people really flex and stretch them in powerful ways to do this work, but then also to get young people registered, to talk about the issues, to push those who are running for office to take progressive stances on the issues, and then work to get their peers to actually turn out and vote. So yeah, it is nonstop.
What are some of the barriers that young people face in getting involved, either sort of formally involved in politics or even just informally getting their voices out there? What are some of the sort of structural issues that they face?
Yeah, I think in some cases, like if we're talking about straight up getting involved in our democracy, which is voting rights is an issue that all the groups in our network work on. We take the lessons from turning young people out to vote in the fall and are like, well, these things are really hard or terrible. Like, let's try to introduce laws to make them better. Or when you're in some, I hate to say conservative states because voting rights should really be a nonpartisan issue, but in conservative states, just really trying to fight back a lot of terrible legislation. Mm-hmm. So getting involved, if we're talking about straight up just voting, using the important tactic of voting, in places like Texas, it's really hard because there is no such thing as online voter registration there, because in order to just register your peers, you have to be deputized, which is like classes you have to take for the county you live in to be legally allowed by the state to register voters in your communities. So there's like bananas barriers and hurdles that you have to jump through just to participate. And then I think, some of the challenges year round are a lot of folks, once they're elected, they don't do their jobs and then, continue to put the work in to make sure that they're paying attention to the voters who elected them. And I think that's a lot of what the groups in our network do. Election day is when the work begins. It's not when the work ends. And so, trying to explain these super wonky processes about like who has power and how to leverage that power, and doing it in a way that's like youth friendly. And, young people are the best ambassadors for change. They're the best ones to mobilize their peers. And the 4+ years I've had in running this network, some of the biggest challenges we've had, honestly, is to make sure their work is resourced, that young people should, be paid to do this work, just like folks of all generations. And so trying to make sure that, yes, we're throwing down on this really important issue, but then also like having to do the fundraising to make sure we could pay the staff to do this work. It's, those are some of the barriers that exist, but certainly not all of them.
Yeah. So youth turnout was really up in 2020. All sorts of turnout among all sorts of different demographic groups was up in 2020. What were some of the things that were driving that? And do you think that Biden and the Biden administration are engaging these youth that turned out to vote them in?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked this, because every time I'm having kind of a bummer day, I'm like, wow, look what we did in 2020. Because we saw an 11-point increase in youth turnout from 2016 to 2020. So 50% of young people voted. You might be like, 50%, that's not a lot. But like getting to 50% was a really, really big deal. And, especially when, again, our government does not make it easy for people to participate, right? Voter registration, the act of just registering to vote, is like literally in place to like, it's the remnants of preventing Black people to vote, allowing Black people to vote, right? Like this terrible registration process we have, right? are all these barriers to even make sure that people are able to access the ballot. That increases. It's important to be reminded of that because that was the result of years of organizing work, of young people, new organizations being created between the 2016 and 2020 elections, of young people making their voices heard, yes, in the streets, but then organizing, of course, at the ballot box. It was the anger of the past 4 years, but then also like the hope and the opportunity to make real change. So yeah, those, I hope we celebrate those numbers for a very long time, and then continue to invest in youth organizing to keep those numbers growing. In terms of the Biden administration, there's been a lot of good. Certainly the progress we've made on the pandemic is really important. Going into the election, again, the pandemic was the number one thing that young people cared about. And so the administration was able to pivot so quickly to make vaccines accessible was incredibly important. The other issues that we've seen come to the top, young people want to cancel student debt. They want to tax the wealthy. Those are
older people want to do those things too.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And I think, those are definite areas where work remains. There's a lot of hope in this generation for what is possible, but this is really where the administration, they've done a lot of good, but they have to go harder. They have to go further, because we're literally, I'm an elder millennial. It's my generation's second recession. Generation Z is coming of age into a recession like we were. Like, this is unacceptable that there are billionaires, period, and that like people got richer during a pandemic when so many people were hurting. So actions to really rein in and tax folks to make sure that college can be more affordable, to make sure that we're able to support things like caregiving and childcare, to make sure we're able to protect our planet. There's just so many places that we need more spending, but we absolutely need the rich to pay their fair share along the way.
Yeah, and how do we keep up that momentum, that engagement, these increased numbers in 2020, without that sort of rage against, a single person that a lot of people was driving a lot of people out, but coupled with this sort of, I'm assuming young people are feeling it because I'm feeling it, this sort of every day feels like there's more roadblocks put up to democracy. There's more things like what's happening in Texas and Georgia and Florida that are sort of getting in the way. And how do we sort of fight that? How do we make sure that youth remain engaged and want to come out and vote in midterms in 2020 when we know that voter engagement is often really down? So what are you looking at doing over the next 2 years to make sure we keep that, to keep those numbers up?
Absolutely. Well, the work has continued since the election. It just, we took a little bit of a break because people absolutely deserved it. But the work has continued. When we talked about Texas, and those Democrats were really brave in making sure that voter suppression bill could not make it over the finish line. And those Democrats were brave because of the organizing work that happened in that state to make it unacceptable for that bill to pass. So there's like that the organizing, it just continues, and we have to make sure that there are more opportunities for young people to get engaged and to organize. So for me, I think about how do we support the groups in communities across the country that are providing that outlet for young people to continue to organize. I'm originally from Bakersfield, California, and I left my hometown because I didn't have a place to figure out how to make change. And I don't want that for any young person. You shouldn't have to leave your hometown in order to make change. Thank goodness there's a lot happening in my community now. But this is about looking to whether the groups in our network, like Minnesota Youth Collective, who's doing really powerful work on police accountability and coalition with others in the Twin Cities. Like I talked about MOVE working at the state capitol to prevent voter suppression bills. In Mississippi, we have an incredible group called Mississippi Votes, who is working to restore the rights of people who have had felonies, because that restoration looks like an individual piece of legislation being introduced for every single person who wants their right restored, and it having to be voted on. Like, that is bananas. Mississippi Votes has introduced dozens of pieces of legislation, and you know what? Not many have made it all the way through, which is unacceptable for people who have served their time. let alone people should never have the right to vote taken away ever. So those groups need resources, and they need resources to do that work, to continue to provide the opportunities for young people to engage and to invest in young leaders who today are the interns and the organizers at our groups, who tomorrow could be, I don't know, a member of Congress. We have an alumni in our network who is a member of Congress. Congressman Joe Neguse from Colorado was one of the founders of our network organization, New Era Colorado. Detroit Action is a multi-generational organization in our network, and they have a great youth program. One of their members is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, right? Like, so that community, that developing the bench on the left, includes investing in young people we've all been invested in at some point in our lifetimes to get to the places we're in. We need to be providing homes for young people to also have that support.
Well, this would be a good time for you to tell our listeners how they can invest in these young leaders.
Absolutely. So highly encourage folks to check out allianceforyouthAction.org. That is our website. And if you want to be inspired, check out our annual report. It's so pretty. I'm so proud. It's a digital annual report. It's way cooler than me. And it really tells a powerful story of organizing that happened last year in really tough times. And so check that out. We take donations on our website, but we also connect to the groups across the country that are in our network, and you can just give directly to them. A little bit goes a long way for these organizations. Actually, monthly donor programs are really important. Maybe you have $5 a month that you can give. That is so powerful, because then those are regular resources groups can rely on, that they're steady. They're not having to chase all the time. Our groups will keep you updated about the powerful work that they're doing. But yeah, check out our map, click on a group that's in your state or near your state, and they'd love to receive those funds directly as well.
I wanted to ask you too, I was looking at this poll that Harvard had done with youth voters, and I was trying to figure out, it said, like, where do you get your news and your information about politics? And it looked like there was no one place that young people go to, that it was pretty spread out among different types of social media and different types of traditional media. How do we make sure that we are reaching and messaging to young voters all over the country?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's really important to give young people a job to reach their peers, because as where young people get this information shifts, there's no one to know better about like where the heck to go next than young people themselves. And so, really that to me, especially as we see so much misinformation online, misinformation coming from elected officials, like it's really important to hire those young people so they can say, hey, like, we should be posting information here, or let me show you how to do so in a way that is authentic, because there's like young people have the biggest bullshit detector, which is great almost all the time, except when you're trying to do large scale things, right? You get called out if you don't do it well, which is like, yeah, just hire young people themselves. This is also part of why the groups in our network have been doing powerful work alongside creatives. They're very informed about what's going on. And especially during the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs, who were creative. So what better opportunity than to hire, the MCs and the artists and the muralists out there, to help also share important information out. So it's one of my favorite things that groups in our network do. We partner with the Center for Cultural Power on this, and Chicago Votes, Ohio Student Association, Leaders Igniting Transformation. They're kind of like OGs in doing this work, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I know my own kids who are not yet old enough to vote are much better at some of this social media than I, like they can pick up Snapchat or whatever and just know how to use it. I thought I was good at that stuff until I saw that they could just pick it up and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am definitely not on all the platforms, which is also why, my tenure at the Alliance has come to an end, and we need a new leader who actually is a bit more in those spaces than I currently am.
Are there other things that you'd like to make sure that we talk about today?
One of the big jobs that we had over the last election cycle was really working to shift the narrative about the youth vote. I think as a millennial, we were kind of the victims of some of the worst headlines that existed about our generation. We're killing this, and we're lazy, and all of these things. And, kind of have this like super blamey, gross culture about like who is or isn't doing enough to fight for change. And then we do this terrible thing where we just don't uplift enough of the good work that's actually happening. And so, whether it's following us online or a cruise, like there is just so much powerful organizing work that happens year round on the state and local level that never make it to the national headlines. And as when folks start to feel a little like cranky towards young people, not organizing in the right ways or doing the right things, like look at what they are doing. Think about when you were young and how you wanted to just like set the world on fire with all that you were trying to lead. And that is leadership that should be nurtured. And that like vision, that impatience that young people have is something that should be nurtured. And we should be investing in their leadership to just hold us accountable for change not happening quickly enough. My mom and I talk a lot about how like the fights of her generation, she's so mad that my generation and the next are still fighting them. And so I just see it all the time where people get really angry at young people for not doing any like things in the right way or whatever. And I'm like, why are young people having to fight these fights still? Clearly, as an elder millennial, we didn't fix everything. Millennials. I'm really excited for the fire and the passion and the intersectionality that Generation Z is bringing to the work. And I think it's on all of us to kind of share the lessons that we've learned and move out the way. And so, I feel like that is like a type of investment that I was really lucky to receive when I started organizing. And I hope that's something that we're all able to do with the incredible young leaders in our communities across the country.
So instead of angrily retweeting someone you disagree with, go find a youth organizer and happily retweet them and uplift what they're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, if you haven't been following Move Texas online, yes, it's important to applaud those House Democrats and what they did on to shut down that SB 7 bill. But like, look at how the young people of Move Texas have been in that state house until like 3 a.m, time and time again over the past few months, working in solidarity alongside partner organizations like Texas Rising and others to shut shit down. Like it is so powerful. Check us out online. Check out the groups in our network. It is, yes, don't angry retweet. Like the haters get enough attention out there, but like, let's uplift the joyful, powerful, transformational work that is happening every single day across the country. Let's uplift those young leaders. We actually have a really awesome series on IG right now where we're highlighting, we're in June now, but in May we're highlighting Asian American young organizers in our network. Like they're so brilliant. Check them out. I love it. I love all the wisdom that they had to share. And we're going to be doing some work on student debt next week. So, there's so much good out there. And, especially in these times, let's like lean hard on the good.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for speaking with me. We will put on our website links to your website and to that great annual report that you mentioned and some of the organizations that you work with. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.